What if I told you that you have never remembered anything exactly as it happened? What if every memory you hold, even the ones you cherish most, has been quietly edited and rewritten each time you revisit it? And what if the moments you believe shaped you the most are not necessarily the ones your brain stored most accurately, but the ones it felt were the most meaningful, the most emotional, or the most useful for your survival? Why can a single scent transport you decades into the past, while entire years slip away as if they were never lived? Why do some memories stay vibrant and alive, pulsing with emotion, while others dissolve into nothing? Is memory a biological archive, a psychological storyteller, or a philosophical illusion we rely on to make sense of our lives? These questions touch the very core of what it means to be human. Without memory, there would be no identity, no continuity, no sense of self that stretches across time. Every choice you make, every habit you practice, every relationship you form, every dream you hold for the future, all of it rests upon memory. And yet, the system responsible for shaping your entire inner world is imperfect, fluid, and constantly changing. As you settle into this exploration, you might gently notice your breath, the calm movement of air, the way your body naturally relaxes when you pay quiet attention. Even in this moment, your brain is capturing details, forming impressions, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Every second becomes part of your inner universe. Tonight, we will journey into that universe. We will explore the evolution of memory, the architecture of how it works, the neuroscience of encoding and recall, the emotional forces that shape what we remember, and the fragile, beautiful, reconstructive nature of recalling a life. We will explore how childhood memories form identity, how trauma alters the imprint of experience, how creativity depends on the blending of memory fragments, and why forgetting is not a flaw in the brain, but a vital part of how it stays healthy and alive. Memory is not just something you have. It is something you are. And to understand, it is to understand yourself in a way few people ever do. Let us begin. The mystery of memory. Memory began long before humans existed, long before language, long before thought, long before anything that resembled a mind. Even the simplest organisms carried the faintest hint of it, a primitive ability to learn from experience. A single-celled creature that pulled away from danger remembered just enough to avoid it next time. A tiny cluster of neurons in an ancient ocean creature learned to associate light with food. These were the earliest sparks of memory, the first moments in which life began to write its story. But why did memory evolve at all? Why would nature go through the trouble of creating such a complex system, one that costs energy, time, and constant biological maintenance? The answer is both simple and profound. Life needed to remember in order to survive. A creature that could remember where food was found, where predators hid, or which environments were safe gained a powerful advantage. Memory allowed organisms to carry the past into the present. It gave them a way to predict the future. It offered a sense of continuity in a world of chaos and uncertainty. Even now, deep within the human brain, those ancient systems remain. The reflexive avoidance of danger, the emotional imprint that forms after a single powerful experience, the way the body learns before the mind even understands. Memory is not just a modern human invention. It is one of the oldest features life has ever created. But memory in humans became something much more, something extraordinary, something transformative. We do not simply remember events. We remember meanings. We remember emotions. We remember ourselves. We can travel backward in time through memory, revisiting moments that shaped us, conversations that changed us, joys that lifted us, losses that carved us open. We can walk through the rooms of our past as if they still exist somewhere, held in a space that is not physical, but feels just as real. And yet, memory is not a perfect recording of the world. It is not a camera. It is not a storage drive. It is a living, dynamic process that changes every time we access it. Two people can experience the same moment and remember it entirely differently. Even the same person can remember an event differently as the years pass. The memory reshaped by new emotions, new understanding, new context. This raises a deeper question. If memory is constantly changing, what does that say about the self? If the story of your past is rewritten with each recall, who were you then, and who are you now? Philosophers have long struggled with this paradox. Some argue that the self is an illusion, a story held together only by memory. Others believe memory is the thread of consciousness itself, the continuity that allows us to call ourselves a single person across a lifetime. Still, others suggest that memory is not meant to be accurate. It is meant to be useful, adaptive, survival-oriented. The brain does not preserve the past for nostalgia. It preserves the past to guide the future. It filters, edits, compresses, and reshapes experience so that what remains serves a purpose. This means that sometimes memory amplifies what mattered, and sometimes it softens what did not. As you listen, you may notice the natural softness of your breath, the grounded feeling of being present. These subtle sensations remind us that memory begins with awareness. What you notice becomes what you may one day recall, and what you ignore may fade before it ever forms a trace. Memory is selective. It has to be. The world delivers far more information than any brain could ever store. But even in its selectivity, memory reveals something beautiful. A portrait of what mattered to you. Not the objective world, but your world. Not everything that happened, but everything that shaped you. Throughout history, humans have tried to understand this internal landscape. Ancient philosophers wondered how the mind could store experience. Medieval thinkers believed memory resided in the soul. Early scientists imagined tiny marks left on the brain, like impressions on wax. Today we know it is far more complex than any of them could have imagined, involving billions of neurons, trillions of connections, and waves of electrical and chemical activity that form the foundation of learning and identity. And yet, despite everything science has uncovered, the mystery remains. How does a physical organ create the experience of remembering? How does electrical activity produce the feeling of nostalgia, the sting of regret, the warmth of a cherished moment? This is not just a scientific question, it is a human question, a deeply personal one, because memory is not just information. It is the emotional texture of a life. It is the meaning we extract from experience. It is the silent sculptor of identity. As we continue this journey, you may again notice your breath, the slow exhale, the gentle return. Let that awareness remind you that memory is formed through presence, through noticing, through being alive to each moment as it passes. Now let us explore the architecture of this extraordinary system. The architecture of memory. Memory begins with sensation. Before a moment becomes something you can recall, it must first pass through the gateway of the senses. Every sound you hear, every shape you see, every scent that drifts through the air, every touch against your skin. All of it arrives as raw sensory data. But the brain does not hold on to most of it. In fact, almost everything you perceive is gone within a fraction of a second. This fleeting stage is called sensory memory, and it is the mind's way of handling the overwhelming flood of information the world constantly provides. Picture a fast-flowing river, millions of details rushing past every moment. Sensory memory captures only the tiniest surface of that river, just enough to give your mind a sense of continuity. Visual impressions linger for less than half a second. Auditory impressions for about 2. It is not meant to preserve anything. It is meant to keep the world feeling stable, smooth, and uninterrupted. If you blink, the scene in front of you does not vanish and reappear. Sensory memory fills the gap, so your experience feels seamless. If you hear a sentence, the beginning does not disappear before the end arrives. Sensory memory holds the sounds together so language makes sense. Without it, the world would feel jagged and broken, like watching life through shattered fragments. Most of what enters sensory memory disappears immediately, but some of it is passed forward. Not because it is important yet, but because your attention lingers on it. Attention is the gatekeeper of memory. It is the mind's spotlight, illuminating certain details while leaving the rest in shadow. What you notice becomes what you have the possibility of remembering. What you ignore becomes part of the vast ocean of experience that leaves no trace at all. From here, the information enters short-term memory. This is the mind's immediate holding space, its temporary workbench. Short-term memory is limited and fragile. It can hold only a handful of items at once, and only for a few seconds unless you deliberately rehearse them. A phone number spoken aloud, a name you just heard, the instructions someone gives you in passing. These fragments survive only as long as your attention stays with them. But there is a more powerful system operating here as well, one that scientists call working memory. Working memory is not simply storage, it is active thinking. It is the space where your mind gathers information, manipulates it, organizes it, and draws meaning from it. When you do mental math, when you follow the steps of a recipe, when you plan your next sentence, when you imagine a future scenario, you are using working memory. Working memory is the stage on which consciousness performs its work. It is where thoughts are shaped, where ideas collide, where decisions form. But it, too, is temporary. Once your mind moves on, the contents of working memory dissolve unless they are encoded into longer-term storage. This is where long-term memory begins to take shape, the vast and intricate network where knowledge, experiences, skills, and emotions are stored. But the word storage is misleading. Long-term memory is not a library of files. It is not shelves of neatly labeled information waiting to be retrieved. The brain does not store memories in a single location or a single form. Instead, it distributes the elements of experience across many regions. A single memory may involve a visual trace in one area, an emotional trace in another, a sensory imprint elsewhere, and a conceptual understanding stored in yet another network. When you recall the memory, the brain reconstructs it by activating all of these pieces at once. Memory is a pattern, a constellation of neural activity, a dynamic reconstruction, not a static recording. This architecture explains why memory is both powerful and fragile. Because it is distributed, it is resilient. Memories can survive damage to certain parts of the brain because their components are spread across many regions. But because it is reconstructive, it is vulnerable to distortion. Each time you remember something, your brain reshapes the pattern, strengthening some parts, weakening others, adding new details, removing old ones. The architecture of memory is less like a storage system and more like a living ecosystem. It changes with experience, adapts to new information, reorganizes itself based on what you use and what you no longer need. The connections between neurons strengthen through repeated activation, a process scientists call long-term potentiation. This strengthening is how learning becomes lasting. But not everything becomes long-term memory. In fact, very little does. Most experiences fade unless they are meaningful, emotional, repeated, or connected to something you already know. The brain is selective because it has to be. If it stored everything, you would be overwhelmed, unable to distinguish the important from the irrelevant. As you listen, you may notice again the slow rhythm of your breath, the grounding sensation of being fully present. This awareness highlights a simple truth. Memory begins with attention, and attention begins with presence. What you notice shapes what you may later recall. The architecture of memory is a masterpiece of biological engineering. It balances fragility with resilience, detail with generalization, stability with flexibility. It allows you to learn, to grow, to adapt, to imagine. It allows you to hold on to the moments that matter while letting the rest dissolve into quiet obscurity. Now that we understand the structure, let us step deeper into the machinery itself. Let us explore the neuroscience of how memories are formed, shaped, and retrieved within the extraordinary landscape of the brain. The neuroscience of memory. Inside the human brain, memory is not one thing and not one place. It is a symphony of regions working together, each contributing something essential to the experience of learning, remembering, and imagining. To understand how memory truly works, we must explore the intricate landscape of the brain, beginning with a structure that has become almost synonymous with memory itself, the hippocampus. The hippocampus sits deep within the temporal lobe, curved like a seahorse, small yet indispensable. It is the gateway through which new experiences pass before they can become lasting memories. When you experience something new, the hippocampus acts like an organizer, gathering the sights, sounds, emotions, and meanings of that moment, binding them into a coherent pattern. Without this structure, new memories cannot form. People with damage to the hippocampus live in a permanent present. Conversations dissolve within minutes. Faces blur. Days repeat with no sense of continuity. And yet, they can often remember their distant past because older memories no longer rely on the hippocampus. They have been gradually woven into the wider network of the cortex. The hippocampus is the beginning of memory, but it is not the end. Once the hippocampus binds an experience into a pattern, it sends these fragments across the brain, where they settle into regions specialized for their content. Visual details flow to the visual cortex. Sounds travel to auditory regions. Emotional tones pass into the amygdala. Conceptual meaning integrates across association networks. A single memory becomes a mosaic, its pieces distributed far and wide, held by the very regions that first experienced them. The amygdala, often associated with fear, is in truth an amplifier of emotional significance. When something matters deeply, whether it is a moment of joy or a moment of danger, the amygdala heightens the brain's attention. It releases neurochemicals that strengthen the encoding of the memory, ensuring that important experiences are remembered vividly. This is why emotional memories feel louder, sharper, more alive. The brain has marked them as essential for survival. It is also why traumatic memories can become overwhelming, imprinted with a strength that ordinary moments never achieve. Beyond these deep structures lies the vast cortex, the outer layer of the brain, where long-term memories gradually settle and find stability. The cortex is not a storage unit. It is a network of networks, a dynamic web of connections. Memories stored here are reconstructed each time they are recalled, which is why they can evolve. The cortex holds what the hippocampus once orchestrated. Over time, the hippocampus steps back, allowing memories to live independently within this distributed system. Encoding a memory, however, is only part of the story. Memory must also be retrieved. Retrieval is the process of reactivating the pattern of neural activity that once represented an experience. When you try to remember something, the brain does not pull a file from a shelf. Instead, it reassembles the pattern, stitching together visual traces, emotional traces, sensory fragments, and interpretive layers. This reconstruction feels seamless, but it is fragile. If one part of the pattern is missing or altered, the memory changes. It becomes incomplete, distorted, or reshaped without your awareness. This is why two people who lived the same moment might remember it differently. Each of their brains encoded different details, filtered by different emotions, beliefs, and expectations. Memory is personal because perception is personal. Two minds never experience the same world, only their own interpretation of it. Deep within the brain, another process shapes memory more than we realize: neuroplasticity. The brain is constantly rewiring itself, strengthening some connections and weakening others. When you learn something new, neurons that fire together begin to wire together. Their connections become more efficient, faster, stronger. This is how practice leads to mastery. It is how skills become second nature. It is how memories transition from fragile patterns to stable networks. Neuroplasticity is not limited to learning. It is the engine of healing after injury. It is the foundation of therapy, allowing traumatic memories to be reshaped and integrated. It is the quiet force that allows the brain to change with experience, to grow through effort, to adapt to challenge. As you reflect on these processes, you might again notice the gentle rhythm of your breath, the ease that comes when you soften the muscles in your face or let your shoulders release a little. These sensations, too, activate networks in your brain, forming traces that may linger. The simple act of paying attention leaves a biological imprint. Memory formation also involves waves of neurochemistry. When you encounter something new, neuromodulators like dopamine rise, signaling novelty and importance. Acetylcholine helps the brain focus, sharpening attention and encoding. Norepinephrine heightens alertness when something emotionally charged occurs. These chemicals do not store memories. They prepare the brain to store them more effectively. They act as signals that say, "This matters. Hold on to this." But memory is not only about the brain's hardware. It is also about its internal rhythms. The brain oscillates in patterns of electrical activity. Some rhythms support attention. Others support encoding. Still others support the integration of memories during sleep. These rhythms create a kind of neural choreography, guiding the flow of information. Consider how different remembering feels compared to learning something new. When you recall a moment, the brain activates a stable pattern. When you learn, the brain must create one. The hippocampus fires bursts of rhythmic activity, binding fragments together. The cortex receives these bursts, gradually strengthening connections across regions. Learning is memory under construction. Remembering is memory being reassembled. As we explore these systems, it becomes clear that memory is not simply a function of the brain. It is the brain's way of making sense of time. Without the hippocampus, time collapses. Without the cortex, patterns dissolve. Without the amygdala, emotion loses its anchor. Without neuroplasticity, experience leaves no mark. Now let your breath flow easily. Feel the natural pause between each inhale and exhale. This gentle awareness stabilizes attention, and attention is the first step of memory. We have seen how memory forms, is stored, and is reconstructed. But to understand why some memories glow with vivid intensity, while others fade into quiet obscurity, we must explore the power of emotion. Let us step into the next part of this journey, where feeling and remembering intertwine. Emotional memory. Emotion is the sculptor of memory. It shapes what we notice, what we store, and what stays with us long after the moment has passed. When an experience is charged with feeling, the brain pays closer attention. It widens its perceptual lens, sharpens its focus, and strengthens the pathways that encode the moment. This is why a single emotional experience can become unforgettable, while countless ordinary moments evaporate almost instantly. At the center of this process lies a small but powerful structure deep in the brain, the amygdala. The amygdala does not create emotion, but it evaluates the emotional significance of an event. It asks a simple but critical question: does this matter? If the answer is yes, the amygdala activates a cascade of biological responses that intensify memory encoding. Heart rate rises, breathing changes, neurochemicals surge. The body enters a state of heightened awareness. This state becomes part of the memory itself. You do not simply remember what happened. You remember how it felt. The warmth of joy, the sting of embarrassment, the rush of adrenaline, the heaviness of grief. These emotional signatures fuse with the sensory and conceptual elements of the moment, creating memories that feel alive. Emotion is not only a signal of importance, it is a spotlight. It directs attention toward what matters most in the environment. In a crowded room, a familiar voice can cut through the noise. In a moment of danger, even the smallest detail becomes seared into awareness. Emotion narrows or widens the focus of perception, shaping what enters memory in the first place. Positive emotions can have just as powerful an impact as negative ones. A moment of awe can expand your sense of time. A moment of kindness can leave a deep imprint. A moment of connection can become a reference point for years to come. The brain is not biased towards suffering. It is biased towards significance. Yet emotional memory has a complexity that makes it both beautiful and challenging. When the amygdala amplifies a moment, it does not always capture the experience accurately. Emotion sharpens certain details while blurring others. It intensifies the colors, but not always the shapes. An argument might feel more hostile in memory than it was in reality. A moment of joy might feel brighter than it truly was. Emotion enhances memory, but it can also distort it. This is because emotional memory is not a photograph. It is a representation guided by meaning. What mattered most is kept. What mattered less fades away. Emotional memories are edited over time, influenced by new experiences, new beliefs, and new interpretations. This is why returning to a familiar place from childhood can feel strangely different. The emotional weight of the memory has changed. and the brain reshapes the past to match the present. Emotion also guides learning. The brain does not remember everything you experience, but it remembers what helps you grow. A failure that taught you something stays with you. A moment of danger teaches caution. A moment of love teaches trust. Memory is not just about storing the past. It is about preparing for the future. Even the body participates in emotional memory. A certain scent, a certain melody, a certain texture under your fingers can transport you unexpectedly into the past. These sensory triggers bypass conscious thought and evoke the emotional imprint directly. It can feel as though the body remembers before the mind does. As you sit with these ideas, you might notice the natural warmth of your breath, the gentle rise and fall of your chest. When you allow the body to soften, the mind often follows. This calm state activates a different kind of emotional memory, one connected to safety, ease, and grounding. These memories are just as important as the intense ones, even if they feel quieter. They form the foundation for resilience. Emotion shapes not only what we remember, but how deeply we remember it. A life rich in emotional depth creates a tapestry of memories that feel meaningful and interconnected. A life lived on autopilot leaves fewer traces. Presence fuels memory, but emotion colors it. There is another system, though, one that operates almost silently, creating memories in a different way. These memories are not about feeling or storytelling. They are about doing. They live in the body and emerge through action, practice, and repetition. To understand this hidden realm, we turn now to procedural memory. Procedural memory. There is a kind of memory that does not speak in words or images. It does not rely on storytelling or emotional detail. It does not ask you to recall the past. Instead, it lives in the body. It shows itself through movement, precision, mastery, and ease. This is procedural memory, the quiet intelligence that allows you to ride on a bicycle long after you have forgotten who taught you, or play a piece of music, even if you cannot remember the notes by name, or type effortlessly without thinking about where each key sits beneath your fingers. Procedural memory is the memory of doing. It is skill. It is repetition becoming instinct. It is the transformation of effort into fluency. Unlike other forms of memory, procedural memory is not stored in the hippocampus. It does not pass through the same gate that episodic and semantic memories rely on. Instead, it is rooted in deeper, older structures of the brain, particularly the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. The basal ganglia are the architects of habit and skill. They take complex sequences of actions and gradually compress them into automatic routines. When you first learn something challenging, like driving a car or learning a sport or practicing a new musical technique, your brain works hard. Every movement requires attention. Every step must be consciously monitored. Mistakes happen. Muscles feel clumsy. The mind feels overloaded. But with repetition, something remarkable occurs. The brain begins to simplify the process. Neurons fire more efficiently. The connections between them strengthen. What once demanded effort becomes easier. Eventually, it becomes automatic. This automaticity is the hallmark of procedural memory. Once a skill is learned deeply enough, it no longer requires conscious control. The basal ganglia handle the sequences. The cerebellum fine-tunes the movements, ensuring grace, timing, and coordination. The cortex, freed from micromanaging the task, is left to focus on other things. This is why you can walk while thinking, why you can drive while having a conversation, why you can play an instrument while feeling emotion instead of counting fingers. The body remembers, so the mind does not have to. What makes procedural memory extraordinary is its durability. While episodic memory can weaken over time and emotional memories can become distorted, procedural memories tend to endure. A pianist who has not touched a keyboard in years can still find their hands remembering melodies. A swimmer returning to the water finds their body slipping back into old rhythms. Skills lie dormant, but rarely vanish. This resilience comes from how procedural memories are encoded. They are not fragments of sensory experience. They are patterns of movement. They are neural pathways strengthened through repetition until they become deeply ingrained. They are built through thousands of small adjustments, each one refining the skill a little more. And this brings us to an important truth. Learning a skill is not just mental. It is biological. Practice physically reshapes the brain. Neurons build stronger connections. Synapses fire more efficiently. Networks stabilize. The brain literally rewires itself to support the skill. This rewiring takes time. It takes patience. It takes consistency. But it rewards you with a kind of memory that is woven into your very being. Procedural memory also holds our habits. Some habits are beneficial, like stretching in the morning, or brushing your teeth, or keeping your home tidy. Others are less helpful, forming when repetitive actions embed themselves deeply into the brain's reward circuits. Habits grow from procedural memory because the brain favors efficiency. Anything repeated enough becomes easier, smoother, and eventually automatic. The same mechanisms that allow a violinist to achieve mastery can also allow unhelpful habits to take root. But this also means that habits can be reshaped. Because neuroplasticity never stops, the brain remains capable of unlearning as well as learning. As you sit with these ideas, take a slow breath and let the body soften. Notice how even breathing is a form of procedural memory. You do not think about the muscles that expand your chest or the diaphragm that lowers as you inhale. The body learned this long ago, and it performs the action flawlessly, rhythmically, continuously. Procedural memory frees the mind to explore, to imagine, to think. It is the foundation beneath complex thought, allowing higher forms of memory to operate without constant interference. Without it, every action would require full attention. With it, life flows more effortlessly. But procedural memory is only one part of the larger story. To understand the self, to understand identity, we must look at two forms of memory that define how we experience the world: semantic memory and episodic memory. One holds what we know. The other holds who we have been. Let us explore these two pillars of personal memory: semantic and episodic memory. There are two great pillars that hold up the inner world of the human mind. Two forms of memory that shape not only what you understand, but who you are. One is the memory of knowledge. The other is the memory of lived experience. Together, they form the architecture of identity, the scaffolding of meaning, the bridge between the inner and outer worlds. Semantic memory is the memory of facts, ideas, concepts, and meanings. It contains everything you know that is not tied to a specific moment in time. The meaning of a word, the capital of a country, the rules of a game, the shape of the solar system, the taste of a familiar fruit, the identity of a historical figure, the difference between right and left. This vast library of knowledge lives within you, growing steadily throughout your life, expanding with every book you read, every conversation you have, every curiosity you follow. Semantic memory does not remember where you learned something. You may know how a rainbow forms, but not recall the exact moment you learned it. You may know how to multiply, but not remember the day your teacher first explained it. Semantic memory is timeless. It strips away context and holds only meaning. It weaves together knowledge so you can navigate the world with understanding rather than guessing. If semantic memory is the library of the mind, episodic memory is its diary. Episodic memory holds the experiences you have lived through, the moments of your personal story, the tapestry of events that shape the narrative of your life. These are the memories that carry context. They have a setting, a place, a time, a feeling in the air, a tone in someone's voice, a quality of light on a particular afternoon. Episodic memory allows you to mentally travel backward in time and re-enter a moment as though it was still unfolding. Episodic memory is profoundly human. It is the foundation of the narrative self, the sense that you are a continuous person who has lived a life filled with scenes and chapters. Without episodic memory, you would still have knowledge. You would still have language. You would still have skills. But you would not have a personal past. You would not have the quiet threads of identity stretching behind you. One of the most extraordinary features of episodic memory is its ability to place you inside the experience. When you recall your first day of school, you do not simply know that it happened. You remember it. You might see the hallway, hear the echo of children's voices, feel the nervous anticipation in your stomach. Memory becomes an inner environment, a space you can revisit, a moment you can inhabit again. This ability to mentally travel through time is unique to humans. It allows you to imagine alternate choices, reflect on past mistakes, savor joyful moments, and revisit experiences that shaped you. Episodic memory is not just about remembering events. It is about understanding yourself through those events. But episodic memory is fragile. It is deeply influenced by emotion, attention, interpretation, and expectation. Two people who experience the same moment will store different episodic memories. And the same person, years later, will recall the moment differently. Episodic memory evolves, shifts, reshapes itself. This is not a flaw. It is the brain's way of updating the past based on the present. Your memories grow as you grow. Semantic memory, by contrast, is more stable. Once knowledge becomes integrated into your understanding of the world, it tends to endure. You may forget details, but core concepts remain. This is why someone with memory impairment may forget events from their life, but still know the names of objects, the rules of grammar, or the layout of their childhood neighborhood. Semantic memory is built to last. The relationship between semantic and episodic memory is not separate. They interact constantly. Episodic memories, once recalled repeatedly, can become semantic. A once vivid memory of learning to swim may lose its sensory details over time, becoming simply the knowledge that you know how. A powerful moment of insight may eventually lose its emotional charge, settling into the category of understanding rather than experience. And semantic knowledge provides a scaffold for episodic memories. When you travel somewhere new, your knowledge of language, geography, or culture helps your brain encode the experience. When you recall an event, the concepts you hold shape how you interpret it. Understanding and experience shape each other endlessly. This interplay explains one of the deep truths of memory. You do not remember reality. You remember meaning. You remember stories. You remember interpretations woven through the fabric of your understanding. Consider how your earliest memories feel. Often they are fragmentary, scattered, dreamlike. Semantic knowledge had not fully developed yet, so the brain struggled to form coherent narratives. Episodic memories rely on concepts, language, and understanding to provide structure. Without them, early experiences remain hazy, unanchored, difficult to place in time. As you reflect on your own life, notice how some memories rise to the surface more easily than others. Some may appear suddenly, vividly, filled with emotion. Others remain distant. This is not random. Episodic memories that are emotionally charged or frequently revisited tend to remain accessible. Those that are rarely recalled or lacked significance at the time may fade more quickly. Semantic memory, however, builds steadily with each repetition, each learning moment, each structured experience. Reading, discussing, watching, teaching, practicing, all of these strengthen semantic networks. This is why knowledge compounds exponentially. The more you know, the more easily you learn. As you listen, let your breath soften. Allow your awareness to settle gently on the present moment. This softening is not to induce sleep, but to create spaciousness in the mind, the same spaciousness that helps memories settle more deeply. A calm state supports learning. A relaxed mind encodes more effectively than a tense one. Semantic and episodic memory also shape imagination. When you imagine the future, you blend knowledge with past experience. You combine what you know with what you have lived. The mind projects forward by looking backward. Every imagined possibility is built from the pieces of your personal history and your stored understanding of how the world works. This interplay between knowledge and experience is part of what makes human memory so extraordinary. It is not just storage, it is construction, reconstruction, reinterpretation, integration. The brain is constantly weaving fragments of the past into the present moment, guiding decisions, influencing emotions, shaping identity. Memory is both the foundation and the architect of the self. Semantic memory builds your understanding of the world. Episodic memory builds your understanding of your place within it. Without one, the other becomes hollow. Without both, the self dissolves. But for memories to become stable, to take root and endure, the brain must move them through a deep and essential process. A nightly ritual that transforms fragile traces of experience into lasting networks. To truly understand how memories become permanent, we must step into the world of sleep, dreams, and the silent sculpting of the mind. Let us explore memory consolidation. Memory consolidation. Every day, from the moment you wake to the moment you fall asleep, your brain is gathering experiences. It absorbs impressions, emotions, conversations, mistakes, patterns, and ideas. It takes in far more than you realize. But these new memories are fragile. They are like soft clay, easily reshaped or erased, vulnerable to interference, distraction, and time. If the brain were to store everything exactly as it was experienced, it would overload within days. Instead, it performs one of the most extraordinary acts of biological refinement. It waits until you sleep. Memory consolidation is the process through which the brain transforms fresh, delicate experiences into durable, long-term memories. Without consolidation, the events of each day would dissolve by morning. You would wake as though your mind had been wiped clean. Learning would be nearly impossible. Identity would shatter into isolated fragments with no continuity. Sleep is not merely a break from consciousness, it is the architect of memory. The first stage of consolidation begins while you are still awake. When you learn something new or have an important experience, the hippocampus quickly binds the elements together. But the connections are temporary. They resemble a rough sketch, outlines drawn in pencil. These early traces exist in what scientists call a labile state, meaning they can be changed or lost unless stabilized. Your brain begins this stabilization immediately, strengthening some connections and tagging certain memories as important. But the majority of the work happens later, when consciousness lets go. As you fall asleep, the brain shifts into a new mode. The external world fades away. Sensory input diminishes. The mind turns inward, and deep within, the hippocampus begins to replay the day. These replays are not literal, like watching a movie. They are bursts of neural activity, rapid sequences that represent the patterns of what you experienced. During sleep, the hippocampus fires these bursts repeatedly, each time strengthening the pathways in the cortex where long-term memories will eventually live. Slow-wave sleep, the deep, restorative stage of the sleep cycle, is essential for this process. In slow-wave sleep, the brain is in a state of synchronized electrical rhythm. This rhythm creates the perfect environment for transferring memories from the hippocampus to the cortex. It is as though the brain clears a workspace, quieting distractions so it can focus on what matters. During these slow waves, the hippocampus sends signals to the cortex saying, "Here is what we need to keep. Here is what we must let go. Here is what must be strengthened." The cortex responds by reshaping its networks, reinforcing certain connections, weaving new memories into its existing architecture. This is consolidation. New memories become integrated with old ones, forming a coherent understanding of the world. The process is astonishingly efficient. A memory that took several seconds to form while awake may be replayed in milliseconds during sleep. These compressed replays allow the brain to consolidate hours of experience into a few cycles of neural firing. This is why a good night's sleep can make complex ideas suddenly make sense. It is why musicians improve overnight, why athletes refine their skills, why students understand material more clearly after rest. The brain practices while you sleep. But consolidation is not just about strengthening memories. It is also about pruning. The brain removes unnecessary connections, discarding information that is irrelevant or redundant. This pruning is essential. Without it, memory would become cluttered with noise. Forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is an essential part of its design. By removing the unimportant, the brain makes space for the meaningful. REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming, plays a different but equally powerful role. During REM, the brain becomes highly active. The hippocampus temporarily disconnects from the cortex, allowing the cortex to process information independently. This is when emotional memories are integrated and rebalanced. REM sleep helps you retain the lessons of emotional experiences without being overwhelmed by the intensity. It softens the sharp edges. It untangles mixed feelings. It helps you make sense of complex social and emotional events. Dreams arise from this process. They are the byproduct of the brain's attempt to integrate memory, emotion, and meaning. A face from years ago, a place from childhood, a fear you never voiced, a hope you never shared. These elements blend into symbolic narratives that, while strange, reflect the brain's attempt to organize experience. Dreams are the poetry of memory consolidation. They reveal the mind's creative work in the night. As you listen now, you might allow your breath to deepen slightly. Feel the ease that comes with a long, slow exhale. This simple gesture activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the system that prepares the brain for learning, reflection, and restoration. Calmness is not passive. It is the ideal state for encoding memories and making sense of what you learn. Consolidation also happens during waking rest. When you pause, when you gaze out a window, when you sit quietly without stimulation, the brain enters a mode similar to early stages of sleep. Neural activity becomes more synchronized. Recently formed memories replay softly. Ideas settle. This is why moments of stillness can be surprisingly productive. The brain needs downtime to process experience, and modern life often deprives it of this. Memory consolidation explains why the timing of learning matters. If you rehearse something before sleep, you strengthen it. If you try to learn while stressed or overwhelmed, the memory trace weakens. If you never rest, the hippocampus loses space for new memories because old ones were never consolidated. There is another layer to consolidation: reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, you reopen it. You place it back into a labile state. You allow it to be reshaped, strengthened, weakened, or updated. When the memory is stored again, it becomes a slightly new version of itself. This means that memory is not a static archive. It is an evolving story. Every recall is an opportunity for change. This is why therapy works. When you bring up a memory in a safe environment, the emotional content shifts. When the memory reconsolidates, it carries new meaning. The brain rewrites the past in light of the present. This is not deception. It is healing. It is adaptation. It is the brain's way of ensuring that memory supports well-being rather than trapping you in old patterns. Consolidation is one of the brain's most remarkable abilities. It transforms experience into knowledge. It shapes identity. It repairs emotional wounds. It allows learning to deepen. It gives the brain the ability to adapt across a lifetime. And yet, even with all this refinement, memory remains fragile. It remains impressionistic, subjective, influenced by emotion and perspective. The same mechanisms that make memory powerful also make it pliable. To understand the full picture, we must explore the delicate, imperfect nature of remembering and why the brain sometimes gets the past wrong on purpose. Let us now enter the next chapter: the fragile nature of memory. The fragile nature of memory. Memory feels solid. It feels trustworthy. When you recall a moment from your past, it often arrives with such clarity, such emotional weight, such internal certainty that it seems impossible for it to be wrong. You feel as though you are returning to the truth exactly as it happened. But in reality, memory is one of the most delicate, flexible, and easily altered functions of the human mind. The fragility of memory is not a defect. It is part of its design. The brain is not an archivist. It is an interpreter. It is not a perfect recorder of events. It is a living system that reshapes itself constantly in order to make sense of the world. What you remember is not the event itself, but the last version of the memory that your brain reconstructed. It is a story built from fragments. It is meaning stitched together with emotion. It is a blend of what happened, what mattered, what you believe, and how you felt at the time you last recalled it. To understand why memory is fragile, we must revisit the brain's architecture. When you experience something, different parts of the brain encode different elements. The visual cortex handles what you saw. The auditory cortex encodes what you heard, the amygdala processes emotional intensity, and the hippocampus binds these fragments into a coherent pattern. But when you retrieve the memory, the brain must reassemble these pieces again. The reconstruction is remarkably close to the original, but never perfect. Even the act of remembering changes the memory. When you recall an experience, the neural pathways that represent it become active and flexible again. They enter a state in which they can be reshaped, strengthened, or altered. When the memory is stored again, it is not identical to the version you accessed. It has been updated. This process is called reconsolidation, and it is one of the reasons memory subtly shifts across your life. A childhood home might feel larger or smaller in your memory than it actually was. A conversation may acquire emotional tones that weren't present originally. A moment of embarrassment might grow sharper with time or soften as new understandings emerge. The memory changes because you change. Each new version reflects a slightly different you. Emotion plays a central role in this fragility. When a memory is emotionally charged, the amygdala's involvement strengthens certain details while weakening others. In moments of fear, for example, the brain focuses intensely on specific details relevant to survival. These become vivid in memory, but peripheral details fade. This selective encoding increases your chances of survival, but decreases the accuracy of the memory. This is why eyewitness accounts can be inconsistent or unreliable, even when people are certain they are telling the truth. The brain has no intention of deceiving you. It prioritizes emotional significance over factual precision. What mattered most is encoded most strongly. What mattered little is lost. This is a cognitive strategy, not a flaw. Memory is also influenced by context. The environment you are in when you recall a memory can alter how it feels. If you are stressed, old memories may feel more threatening. If you are safe and calm, the same memories may feel softer or less vivid. The brain uses present emotion to interpret past events. This filtering helps you make sense of your life, but it also shapes the past according to the present. Even the words you use to describe a memory can alter it. Language is not neutral. When you explain an experience to someone else, you select certain details, emphasize specific elements, frame the event through emotion or meaning. The moment you put the memory into words, you reshape it. And when you remember the event in the future, you often recall the story you told rather than the experience itself. Memory is also vulnerable to suggestion. When someone else offers an interpretation, a detail, or a perspective, your brain may weave it into your own memory without you noticing. You may adopt someone's version of an event as though it were your own. This does not mean you are gullible. It means your brain is cooperative. Memory is a social process as much as a personal one. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of memory's fragility is its relationship to identity. Your memories are not just about the past. They shape how you see yourself now. The brain uses memory to maintain a coherent sense of self. When life circumstances change, the brain sometimes reshapes memories to better fit your current worldview. A memory of an argument may soften if you have forgiven the person. A memory of success may diminish if you are feeling insecure. The brain reshapes the past to maintain emotional balance in the present. This means that memory is not a perfect history. It is a living narrative, and like any narrative, it evolves. It edits, it revises, it adds meaning where none existed. It smooths over contradictions. It creates coherence out of complexity. As you breathe slowly now, letting your shoulders relax, notice how easily the mind drifts between past and present. Memory is not locked away. It is always active, always shaping, always influenced by your state of being. This fragility has a profound advantage. It allows for healing. If memories were perfect, trauma would be unchangeable. Painful events would remain sharp forever. But because memory is reconstructive, the brain can reframe emotional experiences. Therapy, reflection, meditation, and time all change how memories are stored. The past can be reinterpreted. Emotional wounds can soften. The meaning of an experience can evolve. Memory's fragility is not a weakness. It is a gift. It allows you to grow. It allows you to change. It allows you to release what no longer serves you and integrate new understanding into old experiences. But to understand how memory shapes us even more deeply, we must go back to the beginning of personal identity, to the years when memory first begins to form, to childhood, where experience and emotion intertwine to create the earliest blueprint of who we might become. Let us now step into the world of childhood memory. Childhood memory. Childhood is a landscape shaped more by emotion than by detail. It is a place where sensations are vivid, but time is blurry, where moments feel enormous, but memories arrive in fragments, scattered like pieces of a dream. Our earliest years are filled with experiences that shape the core of who we become, yet we remember so little of them. This paradox sits at the heart of childhood memory. The period that influences us most is also the period we recall the least. One of the most striking features of early memory is childhood amnesia. Most people cannot remember anything before the age of 3, and memories from ages 3 to 7 often feel fragmented, dreamlike, or disjointed. This is not because nothing happened. It is because the systems needed to form coherent episodic memories were still under construction. The hippocampus during early childhood is still developing. Its wiring is immature, its networks unstable, and its ability to bind together the elements of experience is limited. Without this binding capability, experiences become impressions rather than memories. A warm voice, a bright light, the feeling of being held. These sensations may remain in the body, woven into emotional memory, but they lack the narrative structure needed for episodic recall. Language also plays a crucial role. Before children develop the linguistic scaffolding needed to describe their experiences, they cannot form memories in the same way adults do. Memory is not only stored in the brain, it is shaped by the words we use to make sense of it. When a child does not yet have the concepts or vocabulary to label an experience, the memory remains unanchored. It floats, untethered to time, sharpening some emotional impressions while letting the rest dissolve. This is why early experiences often influence us unconsciously. They live not as stories we can recall, but as patterns of feeling that shape how we respond to the world. The warmth of a caregiver's presence may form the foundation of a sense of safety. The unpredictability of a chaotic environment may form the foundation of vigilance or anxiety. These emotional patterns are stored deep in the brain's early architecture. Even as children grow older, their memories differ fundamentally from adult memories. Before adolescence, the brain is highly plastic. Neural pathways are flexible, exploratory, far more reactive to experience than adult brains. This plasticity is both a gift and a vulnerability. Children encode emotional experiences intensely, and those experiences can become long-lasting patterns that influence relationships, behavior, and beliefs throughout life. Childhood memories feel different partly because children perceive the world differently. They do not yet have the layers of interpretation and expectation that adults do. Each moment feels fresh, new, unfiltered. A smell might overwhelm them. A sound might enchant or frighten them. A small kindness might shape their understanding of love. A small rejection might echo louder than intended. Children encode emotional significance more readily than factual detail. The meaning of an experience becomes more important than the specifics. This is why some childhood memories are unusually vivid. A moment of awe, a moment of fear, a moment of joy. These experiences carve deep emotional grooves that persist long after the details fade. A child seeing the ocean for the first time, the sound of laughter in a warm room, a parent's anger, a moment of being left behind, a celebration filled with color and light. These memories stay because they shaped our early understanding of the world. The brain during childhood is also highly associative. It links experiences quickly, forming connections between events that may have no real relationship. A child who is frightened by a loud noise at a birthday party might connect fear with crowds. A child comforted during a rainy night might associate storms with safety. These associations are not logical, but they are powerful. They form the emotional foundation that guides future perception. As children grow, their autobiographical memory begins to take shape. This is the part of memory that allows us to see ourselves as individuals moving through time. Autobiographical memory depends on a sense of self, and the self is something that children develop gradually. Before the age of 2, children do not fully recognize themselves in a mirror. Before the age of 3 or 4, they do not have the cognitive structure needed to place themselves into a narrative. Before this sense emerges, memories cannot form around the idea of me. Once the self emerges, memory becomes personal. Children begin to recall events that happened to them rather than events that simply occurred. They begin to say, "I remember," and with those words, the narrative of their life begins. Parents and caregivers play a profound role in shaping childhood memory. When adults talk to children about experiences, what happened, how it felt, what it meant, they help the child encode those moments into structured memories. The conversations adults have with children literally build the architecture of autobiographical memory. Children whose parents reflect with them on experiences tend to have richer, clearer memories from childhood. Culture also shapes memory. Some cultures emphasize individual experiences, encouraging children to remember specific events. Others emphasize community, teaching children to remember routines, traditions, or collective moments rather than personal ones. What we remember is deeply influenced by what our culture teaches us to value. As we age, childhood memories often undergo transformation. They are revisited, reinterpreted, reframed. What once felt frightening may later feel trivial. What once felt ordinary may reveal its significance only years later. The adult mind interprets childhood memories through the lens of maturity, understanding, and emotional distance. The memories change because we change. And yet, some childhood memories remain untouched by time. A scent returning unexpectedly, a familiar melody, the feeling of sunlight on summer skin. These fragments rise to the surface because they are deeply encoded. They bypass narrative and travel directly through the emotional circuits of the brain. They remind us that childhood lives inside us, not as a story, but as a felt sense. You might, in this moment, allow your breath to soften. Perhaps notice how childhood memories drift through your mind, some vivid, some distant, some more feeling than memory. They remind you that memory is not only cognitive, it is emotional, it is embodied. Childhood memory is the foundation upon which adult identity rests. It is the soil from which beliefs, fears, hopes, and habits grow. To understand how memory shapes the self, we must explore what happens when overwhelming experiences enter the system. When moments occur that are too intense, too sudden, too frightening for the young brain to process. This brings us to a complex and deeply human topic: memory and trauma. Memory and trauma. Trauma is not simply an event. It is an experience too overwhelming for the mind and body to process in real time. It is the moment when the intensity of fear, pain, or helplessness exceeds the brain's capacity to integrate what is happening. In ordinary moments, the brain can encode experience into a coherent narrative, weaving together sensation, emotion, context, and meaning. But in trauma, this process breaks down. Memory becomes fragmented, uneven, and deeply emotional. It becomes less like a story and more like an imprint. To understand how trauma shapes memory, we must return to the brain's key structures: the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. In moments of extreme stress or danger, the amygdala becomes highly active. It signals the body to enter survival mode, flooding the system with adrenaline and stress hormones. This activation sharpens emotional memory, encoding the overwhelming intensity of the moment with exceptional strength. The amygdala's message is clear: this must never be forgotten. But while the amygdala is amplifying emotional memory, the hippocampus, the structure responsible for binding memories into coherent narratives, struggles. High levels of stress hormones disrupt its functioning, impairing its ability to organize the experience. The result is a memory that is emotionally vivid, but narratively fragmented. The person remembers the terror, the helplessness, the bodily sensations, the flash of sound or light, but the context, the sequence, the story of what happened becomes disjointed or incomplete. This is why trauma memories often arrive as fragments: a sound, a smell, a sudden tightness in the chest, a flash of an image, a physical sensation with no clear origin. The brain encoded the emotional core of the event, but failed to integrate it into a coherent whole. The memory becomes stored in pieces, disconnected from time, lingering beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Trauma memories are also easily triggered. Because the amygdala encoded the event so intensely, even subtle cues resembling the original experience can activate the emotional imprint. A certain tone of voice, a particular scent, a sudden noise, a posture, a situation that feels similar in ways the conscious mind may not recognize. These triggers activate the amygdala, which reacts as if the danger is happening again, because the memory has not been properly integrated. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for regulation, reasoning, and emotional control, also becomes impaired by trauma, particularly when stress persists. Its ability to calm the amygdala, to place experiences into perspective, and to rationalize emotion becomes weakened. This is why trauma can cause people to feel unsafe, even in the absence of real danger. The brain's alarm system has learned to fire quickly, intensely, and often automatically. Yet trauma does not only leave emotional imprints, it alters the way the nervous system responds to the world. The body remembers trauma through patterns of tension, posture, breath, and physiological reactions. A person may hold their shoulders tightly without realizing why. Their breath may become shallow in certain situations. Their body may brace itself instinctively when confronted with reminders of the past. Trauma becomes embedded not only in memory, but in physiology. But here lies one of the most important truths about trauma. Traumatic memories are not broken. They are unprocessed. They remain active because the brain never completed the work of integrating them. Connecting the fragments into a narrative, placing them into time, context, and meaning allows the brain to soften the emotional intensity and file the memory into long-term storage in a healthier form. This process is not about erasing the trauma. It is about transforming it. Healing is the act of turning an overwhelming memory into a coherent one. This is why therapies that work with memory are so powerful. When someone feels safe enough to revisit the traumatic memory, when their nervous system is calm enough and supported enough, the hippocampus can function more effectively. It can help rebuild the narrative. The prefrontal cortex, activated through reflection and grounding, can help regulate the emotional reaction. The amygdala, no longer firing uncontrollably, can soften its imprint. Gradually, the memory moves from being a constant threat to becoming a past event. The emotional charge decreases. The nervous system learns new patterns. The brain rewires itself through neuroplasticity, integrating the trauma in ways that allow the person to live more freely. This process can happen through many pathways. Narrative therapy helps people put words to the memory and reframe its meaning. The somatic therapies help the body release the patterns stored in its physiology. EMDR stimulates both hemispheres of the brain to unlock and reorganize memory. Mindfulness and grounding techniques train the prefrontal cortex to regulate the amygdala. Supportive relationships provide safety, which is one of the most powerful ingredients for memory integration. Trauma does not erase resilience. In many cases, it reveals it. The brain's capacity to heal is extraordinary. Even deeply embedded memories can be transformed. Even long-standing emotional imprints can soften. Even automatic reactions can be retrained. The nervous system is plastic. The mind is adaptive. The self is not fixed in the shape trauma left it. You might take a gentle breath now, allowing your exhale to be slow, not to force calm, but to create space. Trauma often constricts the breath, and releasing that constriction, even slightly, can signal safety to the body. Although trauma shapes memory in powerful ways, it is not the only influence on how memories evolve. There is a different kind of memory transformation that happens not from survival, but from imagination. The mind blends fragments of memory into new possibilities, weaving old experiences into creative patterns. To understand how memory fuels innovation, insight, storytelling, and imagination, let us explore the intimate relationship between creativity and memory. Creativity and memory. Creativity is often imagined as something magical, a moment of inspiration that descends from nowhere. But real creativity is not born from emptiness. It is born from memory. Every original idea, every artistic expression, every scientific breakthrough, every imaginative leap is constructed from fragments of experience stored deep within the mind. Memory is the raw material of creativity. Creativity is memory rearranged. When the brain creates, it is not inventing from scratch. It is recombining what it already knows in new ways. It is pulling from the vast library of semantic memory, the textured landscapes of episodic memory, the emotional tones of autobiographical memory, the bodily habits of procedural memory, and the conceptual structures that shape understanding. Creativity is not a single process. It is a collaboration across the mind's entire architecture. The hippocampus, often thought of only as a storage gateway, plays a surprising role in creativity. It is not simply a recorder, it is a pattern maker. When the hippocampus encodes memories, it does so in a way that preserves relationships, structures, and associations. These patterns become the foundation for imagination. The same structure that binds memories together also allows the mind to blend them, twist them, combine them, and project them into new forms. This is why creativity thrives on rich experience. The more diverse your memories, the more possibilities the mind has to work with. Travel, books, conversations, challenges, failures, new skills, unexpected environments. Each of these expands the palette the brain uses to create. Creativity is the mind's way of exploring the hidden connections between different memories, revealing relationships you never noticed before. The default mode network, a large-scale brain system active when you are daydreaming, reflecting, or letting your thoughts drift, plays a central role in this creative process. When you are not focused on a task, when your mind has room to wander, the default mode network becomes highly active, blending memory fragments into new combinations. This wandering is not pointless. It is the brain's way of exploring possibilities. Think of the moments when you have your best ideas, in the shower, on a walk, while staring out a window, when your body is occupied but your mind is free. These moments allow the brain to enter a relaxed state where memories can mix and merge without the constraints of directed thinking. Creativity flourishes in the space between effort and ease. Emotion also fuels creativity. Emotional memories carry intensity, meaning, and depth. They provide a vivid palette for storytelling, art, music, writing, innovation, and problem-solving. Emotion gives memory color, and creativity draws from that color to express something new. A poem may be built from a moment of heartbreak. A scientific insight may be sparked by a moment of curiosity. A melody may rise from a childhood feeling. Creativity transforms emotional memory into expression. But creativity is not only about combining memories, it is also about breaking free from them. The prefrontal cortex plays a role in inhibiting obvious associations, allowing the mind to look beyond the first, most predictable solutions. When this inhibition loosens, during play, during experimentation, during rest, during flow, new patterns emerge. Creativity requires both structure and freedom. It requires memory and imagination. It requires using the past while stepping beyond it. This balance can be seen in the state called flow, where skill and challenge meet in a way that quiets self-conscious thought. In flow, the brain's executive control systems temporarily quiet. Memory-driven patterns surface effortlessly. Ideas connect without force. The mind becomes fully immersed in the present while drawing seamlessly from the past. Flow is not the absence of memory. It is memory in motion, memory made fluid. Creativity also depends on forgetting. This seems paradoxical, but it is essential. When the brain holds onto information too rigidly, creativity stalls. Forgetting unhelpful details or outdated associations allows the mind to reorganize its internal structures. It frees cognitive resources, making space for new combinations. Forgetting is the pruning that allows creativity to grow. As you reflect on this, notice how your own mind works. Notice the images that arise when you imagine something new. Notice how memories drift in and out, not always clearly, but in fragments. Creativity begins in these fragments. It lives in the space where memory meets possibility. You might take a slow breath now, letting your exhale settle gently. In this calm state, your mind becomes more associative, more fluid, more receptive to unexpected connections. Relaxation opens the doorway to creativity because it quiets the noise of urgency and allows memory to flow more freely. Creativity is the mind's way of transforming what it knows into what it has never seen. But for the brain to do this effectively, it must let go of certain memories, weaken some connections, and release what is no longer necessary. Forgetting is often misunderstood as a failure of memory. It is, in fact, one of the most important aspects of how the brain stays healthy, adaptable, and creative. To understand the full story of memory, we must explore the science of forgetting, not as a flaw, but as a function. Let us now move into the next chapter, forgetting. Forgetting. Forgetting is often seen as a flaw, a frustrating limitation of the human mind. We misplace names, lose track of conversations, struggle to recall where we set something down just moments ago. We forget birthdays, promises, faces, and entire chapters of our own lives. And yet, forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is one of its most essential functions. The ability to forget is as important as the ability to remember. To understand why, we must recognize that memory is not designed to store everything. The world delivers far more information than the brain could ever hold. If every detail of every moment was stored permanently, the mind would become a cluttered archive, overwhelmed by irrelevant data. You would struggle to make decisions, focus your attention, or understand what truly matters. The brain must forget in order to function. Forgetting is not passive. It is an active biological process. When a memory stops being relevant, the brain begins weakening the synaptic connections that support it. This weakening is not arbitrary. It is guided by use, relevance, emotion, and meaning. The memories you revisit regularly, the ones connected to strong feelings, the ones that serve your identity or future goals, are preserved. The rest gradually fade. This selective fading is essential for clarity. Imagine if you remembered every detail of every morning you ever experienced. The color of the sky, the texture of your toothbrush, the sound of each footstep on the floor. These details would overwhelm your mind. You would drown in memory. Forgetting removes what is unnecessary so that what remains can guide your life. The brain also forgets to remain adaptable. When old information becomes outdated, forgetting allows new learning to take its place. This process, called synaptic pruning, strengthens the pathways you use and trims away the ones you no longer need. It is the same process that helps children refine their understanding of the world and allows adults to unlearn habits, beliefs, or skills that no longer serve them. Children experience forgetting on a massive scale. Their brains produce far more connections than they will ever use, and as they grow, trillions of synapses are pruned. This pruning is essential for development. It allows learning to become more efficient, memory to become more focused, and behavior to become more coherent. Without forgetting, a child's brain would remain an overwhelming network of unused potential. Forgetting is also key to emotional balance. When a painful memory loses its intensity over time, it is because the emotional connections are weakening. This does not erase the experience, but it softens its impact. The brain understands that constantly reliving pain is harmful, so it gradually reduces the emotional weight of certain memories unless they are continually reactivated. Forgetting is part of healing. But not all forgetting is gentle. Sometimes the brain forgets because it is overwhelmed, because attention was divided, because the moment lacked relevance, or because it was not encoded well in the first place. The brain cannot store what it never fully processed. If your attention is elsewhere, the experience may never reach long-term memory. This is why divided attention weakens memory and why presence strengthens it. Forgetting also happens in moments of stress. High stress can impair the hippocampus, making it difficult to encode new memories. People experiencing chronic stress or trauma may struggle with memory formation, not because they are failing, but because the brain is prioritizing survival over learning. Stress shifts the brain into a mode where remembering details becomes less important than responding to threats. You might notice this in your own life. Times of calm produce clear, stable memories. Times of chaos blur together. This is not a lack of effort, it is biology. Another layer of forgetting emerges through interference. New memories sometimes disrupt old ones, and old ones can interfere with new learning. If you study two similar concepts back to back, one may overwrite the other. If you learn a new phone number, the old one fades. This interference is not accidental. It prevents the mind from storing redundant or conflicting information. And yet, forgetting is not always permanent. Sometimes memories that seem lost are simply inaccessible. The information is still there, encoded somewhere within the brain's networks, but the cues needed to access it are missing. A scent, a song, a familiar place can suddenly unlock a memory long forgotten. This is because memory is cue dependent. It requires the right trigger to reassemble the pattern. The fact that forgotten memories can return unexpectedly shows that forgetting is not a deletion. It is a narrowing of access. The memory becomes harder to reach, but does not disappear entirely. In some cases, this is protective. Memories that no longer serve you drift quietly into the background, allowing space for new growth. As you breathe gently now, notice how memory feels in this moment. Notice the ease with which certain experiences come to mind and the quiet distance of others. This ebb and flow is natural. It is the mind's way of maintaining balance. Even creativity depends on forgetting. If the mind held on to old ideas too rigidly, it would struggle to generate new ones. Forgetting outdated associations allows the brain to reorganize its networks, making room for new patterns, insights, and innovations. Forgetting is not the opposite of creativity. It is its partner. The brain forgets so that it can learn. It forgets so that it can focus. It forgets so that it can heal. It forgets so that it can create. Forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is the refinement of it. And yet, as powerful as our biological memory is, human beings today increasingly rely on external systems, technology, devices, and digital tools to store information. This introduces a new chapter in the story of memory, one that stretches beyond biology and into the evolving world of artificial intelligence and digital augmentation. To understand where memory is heading, we must explore the future of how humans remember. The future of memory. Memory has always been shaped by the environment in which it lives. For most of human history, memory was carried in the mind alone, passed through stories, songs, rituals, and shared oral traditions. Communities remembered together. Knowledge lived through people rather than objects. Then writing arrived, and memory expanded beyond biology. Clay tablets, papyrus, ink, and paper became extensions of human thought. Suddenly, memory could last longer than a lifetime. It could travel across continents. It could survive the fragile limits of a single human mind. Today, we stand at the threshold of an even greater transformation. Technology has become an external memory system, so integrated into our lives that the boundary between biological memory and digital memory grows thinner by the year. Smartphones store our contacts, our histories, our photographs, our appointments, our notes, our plans, our passwords, our conversations. Search engines store the world's knowledge. Social media stores the visual diary of countless lives. Artificial intelligence stores patterns, preferences, and predictions of our behavior. For the first time in human history, memory is no longer limited by the brain. It extends outward into a digital ecosystem that remembers for us. This expansion brings both liberation and challenge. On one hand, external memory frees the mind. We no longer need to recall every detail. We do not rely on rote memorization to navigate the world. We use maps instead of mental geography. We use reminders instead of rehearsed practice. We use cloud storage instead of personal archives. This offloading allows the brain to focus on higher level thinking, creativity, strategy, reflection, imagination. But the other side of this transformation asks deeper questions. What happens to the human mind when so much of its memory is externalized? How does the brain adapt when technology becomes part of its cognitive ecosystem? Does biological memory weaken when digital memory strengthens? Or does the mind evolve, becoming more specialized, more efficient, more free to think rather than store? The science suggests a mixture of adaptation and trade-off. When people rely heavily on digital tools, they tend to remember less detail internally, but they become better at remembering how to access information. Instead of storing facts, they store pathways, how to search, where to look, which tools to use. This is called transactive memory. The system you use is as important as the memory itself. Couples, teams, and communities develop transactive memory naturally. Now, humanity is developing it with machines. Artificial intelligence introduces an even more profound shift. AI can store and process information at scales unimaginable to the human brain. It can recognize patterns across billions of data points. It can generate insights, summaries, art, language, and analysis in seconds. As AI becomes more integrated with daily life, it becomes not just an external storage device, but a partner in cognition. This raises philosophical questions that stretch beyond neuroscience. If AI can remember for us, does it become part of our memory system? If technology mirrors our preferences and habits, does it become a reflection of our identity? If future brain-computer interfaces allow direct communication between neurons and digital systems, where will biological memory end and digital memory begin? Scientists are already exploring interfaces that allow paralyzed individuals to control devices through thought, implants that restore memory in damaged brains, and technologies that track neural signals to decode intention. These advancements hint at a future where memory is not limited to organic tissue, where memory can be supported, augmented, or even repaired through technology. Imagine a future where people with memory impairments can access a digital backup of their memories, or where learning becomes accelerated through neurotechnological assistance, or where creativity is amplified through AI systems that expand the mind's associative capabilities. Such ideas may seem distant, but they are closer than they appear. Yet, as technology advances, we must preserve the human essence of memory, the emotional depth, the narrative complexity, the personal significance that machines cannot replicate. A device can store a photograph, but it cannot store how the moment felt. An AI can analyze language, but it cannot inhabit the memory of a childhood afternoon held in sunlight and innocence. Biological memory carries an irreplaceable emotional weight. This difference reminds us that memory is not just information. It is identity. It is meaning. It is the continuity of consciousness. And while technology can assist us, expand us, and even challenge us, it cannot replace the human experience of remembering. Memory's future is a collaboration. The brain will continue evolving alongside tools that amplify it. Humans will become increasingly skilled at navigating a world where knowledge is abundant and instantly accessible. But our biological memory will remain the foundation of who we are. The stories we tell, the emotions we carry, the relationships that shape us, these are not things we would ever outsource. They are too deeply woven into the experience of being human. As you breathe gently now, allow a moment of reflection. Think of how your memory has already expanded beyond your mind, how your devices store your photographs, how your calendar holds your plans, how digital messages store your relationships. And yet, beneath all of that, your inner memory still holds the meaning, the feeling behind the photograph, the excitement behind the plan, the love behind the message. Memory's future is not a replacement. It is an evolution, a widening of the space in which humans think, remember, and create. And now, having explored the past, the present, and the future of memory, we arrive at the final understanding, a synthesis of everything memory reveals about time, identity, and the self. Let us now enter the conclusion. Conclusion. Memory is the thread that stitches your life together. It is the quiet architect of identity, the internal historian that gives shape to your past, meaning to your present, and direction to your future. Without memory, there would be no story, no continuity, no sense of self that endures from one moment to the next. And yet, memory is not a single solid entity. It is dynamic, it is fluid, it is alive. Throughout this journey, we have seen how memory is formed through delicate biological processes, how it is shaped by emotion, how it can fracture under trauma, strengthen through repetition, soften through time, and blossom into creativity. We have seen that memory is not a perfect recording, but a reconstruction, a living narrative that changes as you change. We have seen that forgetting is not a failure, but a form of refinement. And we have seen how technology is becoming a new partner in the evolution of human memory, expanding what we can store and access, even as it challenges us to preserve the deeply human essence of remembering. Memory is far more than the past. It is the foundation of consciousness. It is the lens through which you interpret the world. It is the bridge across time that allows you to wake each day as the same person who fell asleep the night before. Every choice you've made, every belief you hold, every person you love, every dream you carry, these are not only experiences. They are memories woven into identity. They are the fabric of who you are. As you breathe slowly now, let your awareness soften. Feel the gentle weight of your body, the grounding presence of this moment. Notice how even this moment is already becoming memory. Notice how the now dissolves into the past with every passing second, becoming part of your inner world. The mind is always recording, always shaping, always interpreting. Memory allows you to revisit the warmth of childhood, the sweetness of small joys, the sting of regret, the growth that emerged from challenges. It allows you to learn from mistakes, appreciate beauty, anticipate danger, and connect deeply with others. It allows you to create art, imagine futures, and reflect on who you have been. Memory is not simply something you have. Memory is something you are. You are a story in motion, a narrative constantly being revised, a collection of moments, some clear, some blurred, held together by meaning. And that story is not finished. The brain you carry is still plastic, still adaptive, still capable of rewriting old patterns and forming new ones. You are not confined to the memories that shaped your past. You are free to create new ones, free to reinterpret old ones, free to heal, grow, and evolve. Even now, the memories of everything you've learned, reflected on, and felt throughout this exploration are settling in your mind. Some parts will stay vividly, others will fade gently, some will become integrated with ideas you already hold. Others may spark new curiosity or new perspectives in the days ahead. As we close this journey, allow one more slow breath to rise and fall. Let the mind rest in the spaciousness that follows. Memory is not only the story of where you have been, it is the foundation of where you are going. And your story, your memory, is still unfolding.